and welcome to the 4.0 Solutions Industry 4.0 Community Weekly Podcast for Tuesday, June 21st, 2022. And this is actually being pre-recorded. This is one of 3 pre-recorded podcasts that I'm doing. As you guys may remember, last week I let everybody know I'm going on sabbatical to finish my book. I've got 5 chapters. I got 3 rewrites and 2 new chapters I need to do in about 6 weeks. The book has been delayed now about 6 or 7 months, but I think it's going to be worth it. So I'm on sabbatical, and so the plan for the podcast is to I'm going to pre-record 3 podcasts, and they'll premiere in the normal time slot. We'll still have a live chat, and the team's all going to be on there. If you guys have any questions for me, you can ask them in the live chat or ask them in the comments below. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts or any of your favorite podcast apps, you can just come back to the YouTube channel and you can look up this week's podcast and ask your questions there. And I will try to answer them. The plan is I'm shooting this podcast on Monday, June 20th in the evening. And I'll shoot 2 more next week. I think JP Monas is going to be one of the co-hosts, and I think Brendan Riley is going to be one of the co-hosts. And then one of them will be the podcast for next week, and then one will be for the podcast after that. The 3 remaining podcasts while I'm on sabbatical will be they're going to be co-hosts from the community. I've talked to Kevin Jones already. I talked to Dave Schultz. I think they're going to do one of them together, and Cheryl's going to put together co-hosts for the podcast for those final 3 weeks. I will return the first week in August, and so with that, let's get into the announcements. So, I briefly talked about this before. This is actually really exciting stuff, and I think everybody, hopefully everyone's going to find this really exciting. So we are one of the event sponsors for the Shaw Classic in Loveland, Colorado on August 13th and 14th. And if you guys don't know who Brian Shaw is, he's basically like he's the Michael Jordan of strongman. So he's the GOAT. Right. He's a 4-time world's strongest man. He's, based in Colorado. He's got a huge YouTube following. I think like 2 million followers. You can go look up Shaw Strength or Brian Shaw. His YouTube channel is really cool. Like, he does a lot of eating 20,000 calories in a day. So Brian Shaw he's 6'8", and he's 440 pounds, and he is built like a brick shithouse. I mean, he is just absolutely jacked. I think he's 39. I think he just was in the World's Strongest Man competition just ended a couple weeks ago. And I think he was in his 14th World's Strongest Man final. And of all the people he was competing against in that final, no one had been in more than 3 finals. So to put it in perspective, like, he's the greatest of the greatest of the greatest. And not only that, he's a profound human being, and he happens to be one of my son's hero. I lift weights with my kids. I power lift with my kids. My son Jared, Brian, is like his hero. And we reached out to Brian Shaw to see if we could somehow partner with him. So I think starting in December or January. So this sponsorship's been in place. We've been working on this for 6 months or so. But we are the title sponsor of the Shaw Classic, which is going to take place at the Budweiser Event Center in Loveland, Colorado, so in Larimer County, August 13th and 14th. We're going to be there. Our whole team will be there. The 13th is a Saturday. The 14th is a Sunday. Those are the 2 days of the competition. We will be there Friday evening for like a meet and greet with the athletes and stuff. And then on the 13th and the 14th, we're going to be, I don't know which day the deadlift is, but we have developed vision technology, which I had talked about, and I had originally pitched this idea with Brian and his wife Carrie. Brian's literally the nicest guy in the whole world, and I had originally said, hey, I'd love to have you on my podcast and interview you and when we were talking about sponsoring, he even said to me, he's like, no, I'll come on your podcast. You don't have to sponsor at all. I love what you guys are doing and your mission in life. And I share very common values. And so there's been a lot of synergy in terms of like just core values as a human being. So what I originally pitched to him was we've developed vision technology that I know is going to work with athletes. And so what I'd like to do is tweak what we've developed for athletes. And so the deadlift, or anybody who doesn't know, if you guys aren't into weightlifting or whatever, the deadlift is basically a barbell in front of you with bars on it. You basically kneel over and you pick it up, as much weight as you possibly can. Now, there is a technique to it. Bend your knees correctly, keep your back in the right position, put your hands in the right position, shoulders over your ankles, that kind of thing. But these guys lift prodigious amounts of weight. So if you can, as an average person, if you can deadlift, say 300 pounds, you're deadlifting a significant amount of weight. If you're deadlifting 500 pounds as an average person, you're in an elite level. You'd be, deadlifting weight that nobody else in your gym is deadlifting. If you're at 415 or something, that's a lot of weight. And then people like, Larry Wheels and, these other, jacked guys you see on YouTube, they're generally doing like 800 pounds, right? These strongmen, easy elite strongmen they're 1,000 pounds plus. So at one point, Brian had held the world record in the deadlift, and then this other guy, Eddie Hall, broke it. And there's this famous video of him, bleeding out of his nose as he's, I think it was like 1,100 pounds or something. These are absurd weights. At this strongman competition, they are going to be doing a deadlift, I think, with truck tires. So I think there will be truck tires on the bar. And our vision system is going to be capturing the ergonomics of the athlete. So basically, we're using some stuff from Facebook, some vision technology from Facebook. We're using some stuff we've developed. We're using an NVIDIA processor to handle all the processing. And then we're picking up ergonomics. We're picking up the bar itself, the tires themselves. We're looking at the flexion of the bar, and then we're running a bunch of algorithms. And what we're trying to do is we're comparing those movements against previous movements that we've been able to collect on the internet, that kind of stuff. Okay. And what we're going to try to do is predict in real time whether the athlete is going to actually succeed on the deadlift or fail. We're also our algorithm is actually going to say whether they succeeded or failed. But big thing what we're going to try and do is we're going to try to predict the likelihood of injury. Okay. And I don't know if we have enough data in the data set to accurately predict that, but what we will be doing at this competition is collecting that data. So we're going to have our vision system down in the arena. We'll actually be down in front of the athletes during the deadlift, and we'll be collecting that data and running it in real time. We'll actually be streaming all of that data, so all of the measurements, all of the telemetry itself. So we're converting everything into whole numbers. We're turning all the values into whole numbers, and we're going to be streaming them to a MQTT broker in the cloud. So a couple, if you guys are interested in, we're going to be there the whole weekend. So if any of you guys are in Colorado and you guys, if you're into weightlifting, not into weightlifting, I happen to be into weightlifting. This is going to be fun for me. We were originally going to, we bought like VIP tickets and stuff down on the arena floor before we ever even reached out to Brian, and we still have all those seats. So we'll be spectators, with the exception of during the deadlift. We're going to be there collecting the data, literally, right down there in front of the athletes, which is just going to be badass. If you're into weightlifting at all, and then you probably already know who Brian is, and you probably know the people that are going to be there. But the people who are attending this strongman competition are like the best of the best. So the Stoltman Brothers, who are these faded, I think they're Scottish, but they're from the UK. Tom Stoltman is the 2-time reigning world's strongest man. He just won his second world's strongest man. He'll be there with his brother Luke. They have a big YouTube channel as well, if you guys want to check them out. Alexi Novikov, who is a Ukrainian world's strongest. He was a world's strongest man, I think, in 2020. This dude literally, which is just crazy. He was fighting in the war in the Ukraine, came to the United States, competed in the competition in Columbus during the war, then went back and competed and fought in the war, and then went to the World's Strongest Man. And I think he placed, actually. I think he ended up, he may have dropped. I don't know. I can't remember. I know Brian finished, Tom won. I can't remember who finished second. I have to look at the placings. But like the attendees these are the best strongmen in the entire world. And the reason why is because Brian is incredibly highly respected. He's the GOAT. And so when the GOAT puts on a competition, everybody comes. So if you guys are going to be in Colorado, you're interested in coming, you can just Google the Shaw Classic 2022. It's at the Budweiser Event Center in Larimer County Event Center Complex. And, you know, I'd love for you guys to come out and say hi, and we'll show you the technology and that kind of stuff. So long announcement, but we really hadn't talked about this that much. You know, I kind of kept it close to the vest because, to be honest with you, I wasn't 100% confident I was going to be able to get the vision system completed like in actual beta by May, and I needed it in beta by May for us to be able to use it in August. So the technology is pretty incredible. What we're going to do from here is we're going to move towards using this vision system to automatically collect people's workout information. You know, maybe we partner with, you know, one of the fitness companies, Rogue Fitness or something, and do something with this data. But my goal here is to demonstrate to the world what's possible, right? Because I spend all this time trying to convince people. Part of what we'll talk about today in the podcast is, you know, I've been having this conversation with an OEM that works with automotive manufacturers, and we spend so much time talking about what's possible, right? And rather than me talk about it, I just want to demonstrate it. Okay, so that's part of what we're doing here. Okay. The other thing is this weekend, we're leaving Thursday, Friday, June 24th. We're one of the gold sponsors of the 17th annual Air and Space Forces Mile Chapter charity golf tournament in Elizabeth, Colorado. So again, if you're in Colorado, we're going to fly up to Colorado at the Spring Valley Golf Club. On Friday, we're going to be playing in this golf tournament. We're one of the big, I think we're, you know, the gold sponsor of the actual charity event. Little thing that most people don't know, I was in the Air Force. I only spent about a year in because I had a knee injury. But Air Force was originally my life's plan. So we had one of our employees had reached out and said, "Hey man, you know, my dad runs this tournament, or he's part of the tournament for this charity organization. Would we be interested in sponsoring?" And we said, "Absolutely, we'd love to." So there's another company called Light Eye who does, you know, their tag name is Beyond Human Vision. They're one of the title sponsors as well. They have some pretty cool technology as well. Just a couple more announcements, and then we'll get into the questions and the discussion for this week. We're actually expanding our corporate offices. So part of what's happening during this 6-week sabbatical is we have doubled the amount of office space we have in our corporate offices here in Dallas. On July 1st, we will literally double our amount of space. We're building a brand new studio. So this studio, right now there's only 2 shots in this studio. We're actually adding a third. So we're going to be doubling the size of the studio. So we're going to have this shot here. We're going to have a whiteboard shot that's on an electric whiteboard on the Vibe board. And then on the other side, they're putting all the soundproofing and everything in. We're going to be putting in the tech benches. So you're going to have a 10-foot long tech bench. We're going to have a robot on there, variable frequency drive, all of our test bench stuff so that we can shoot content there as well. And all the videos I have to shoot for the step 2 training, we're going to be shooting on that third shot there. So that a lot of that's happening over the next 6 weeks while I'm out is all of the construction and everything is going to be done. And so when I come back, I'm going to be coming back to a new expanded studio. This shot will look the same. I think we're going to change some of the lighting, but other than that, this shot's going to remain the same for continuity, but the offices are expanding. I think we're doubling the number of offices we have, primarily because we have, what we've been working on is a product development group. We have 6 products that I've talked about at various times. MES 4.0 is one of those. We have and OPC to MQTT gateway that we have. We have a couple of other very interesting products I think people are going to be really like. I've been trying to get someone else to build one of them, but we've decided to do it ourselves. And then we have another 11 products. They're all Industry 4.0 IoT stuff. Most of them are tools for digital transformation, right? And a chunk of our company is breaking off into product development. So when I come back, I will be leading the product development group exclusively. So I have two of the executives on our board of directors are going to be taking over as the presidents of 4.0 Solutions and Intelligent Integration, and I'm going to be taking over as president of this product development group. One of our lead architects is going to be the lead product developer. So he's going to be leading the team of engineers who will be developing our products. So super exciting. That's part of what this expansion is about, so that we have the space to do that stuff. So there a lot of really cool things are going on here. So if anybody comes out to Dallas, say after September 1st, we'd love to show you guys around and show you how the sausage is made. We will not be attending CSIA. I get this question a lot over the last 2 weeks. We're not going to CSIA, which is June 27th to June 30th next week in Denver. The reason we are not going is because we chose to spend all of our marketing money for those types of events on the AFA Charity Golf Tournament, the Shaw Classic, which we've made a huge investment in, and ICC 2022. Our whole team will be going to ICC this year in September. Just a quick reminder, monthly mentorship call is every second Friday. The next one will be July 8th, which I will be leading. The monthly mastermind call will be July 18, I think. It's the third Friday. And then the next advisory board meeting is July 1st, and then we'll meet the following Wednesday, which is July 6th. Just want to give a quick shout out to my man, Omar. He messaged me and said, "Hey, Walker, did you get those High Bite t-shirts?" I said, "Yes, I did." So for those of you who are listening on the podcast, I'm wearing a High Bite t-shirt, and I have my High Bite Yeti cup. So if you guys are using High Bite's product, highly recommend you reach out and see if you can't twist some arms to get some swag. Which one of the reasons I want to start with on the content this week is, if you guys have not checked out High Bite, the beta version 2.4 yet, you really should. They've added in a couple of so right now High Bite version 2.3 is the long-term supported release. Okay. Again, for those of you, High Bite is industrial data ops software for Industry 4.0. Think of it this way. It's basically software that does connections to basically anything, any industrial protocol for the most part, does models, and it does flows. So what it does is it takes unlike data and it turns it into like data. It makes you create data types, and they call those models. They're using the software development term as opposed to the industrial term. They connect primarily, they started out connecting to OPC UA, and then you could basically take OPC UA namespaces. You can create a new model, map the OPC UA namespace to a new model, and then you can create a flow, which is essentially an information flow. How do you take the information, the data that's in that model, and transmit it to some other connection? So you can take OPC UA, you can convert it to MQTT. You can take MQTT and convert it to any number of cloud-based connectors. So Azure IoT Hub, for example, or AWS. Okay. But 2.3 is the latest release. This is totally unsponsored, by the way. High Bite's not a sponsor. They're just a partner. Okay. I've been playing with the 2.4 beta quite a bit, actually. And, I've a lot of people ask me about High Bite, like, why are you so big on High Bite? I mean, number one, data ops is something everyone has to do. Like, taking unlike data in your business and turning it into like data is something every single manufacturer has to do. Like, if you're going to create a digital ecosystem where you're unifying all the data in your business, and I'm going to talk about this in a couple of minutes, and you're going to have a single source of truth, and you're going to have a common structure, and you're going to be able to look at a snapshot of the business, the current state of the business right now, no matter where I'm looking at. So I can look at the current state of this asset, the OE calculation in this area, whatever, all those things in one place. Okay, so that I can either visualize it or analyze it, or I can post-process it, whatever I'm going to do. The first thing you have to do is you have to connect to everything. right? You got to connect to all your data. Then you got to collect the data, and then you got to store that data, okay? The step between collection and storage is modeling, okay? What you want to do is you want to store it in it. You want to collect it, map it in a common structure that makes sense, a semantic hierarchy. That's why we use ISA 95 Part 2. You want to put all that data in enterprise site area line cell, and we call that the unified namespace, right? And then you use functional capabilities within those namespaces. So within that enterprise site area line cell, we have namespaces that are functional capabilities, okay? Between that collect and store phase, okay, of that first step of becoming a smart business, you have to model your data, okay? And HiByte is the first Industry 4.0 product that was ever built to completely and totally specialize in the connection, collection, modeling, and storage of data. And it doesn't store, but it sends it to the thing that's going to store it, okay? Whether that's your data lake up there, your historian over there, in it, whatever format. They'd made a couple of changes. So Aaron Semley, who's the CTO, he's the guy who's basically in charge of the technology that they're developing. And Aaron is a fucking amazing, technologist. There's just no way around it. He's a former Kepware guy. In fact, everybody at HiByte, I think, is, at least the founders were all former Kepware people. Tony Payne, who's the guy who's the original, he's one of the founders of the company. These guys, Kepware made simply put, Kep server is the best OPC server that has ever been built in all of human history. And Tony Payne led the development of that venture, led the development of all the drivers that they use to create that OPC server. So to acquire that data from proprietary protocols and then map everything using OPC information models. Tony is the guy who led that, right? Who better to develop the data ops tool for Industry 4.0 than the people who built the best OPC server that's ever existed in all of human history? That's part of the reason I'm high on HiByte. I jumped in with both feet when they didn't even have a product ready, because I knew, it's like the Warren Buffett philosophy of investment. You pick strong leadership and strong business fundamentals over guts, feelings, cash, all that kind of stuff at any given time. That's what I did. These are the people I know can get it done, and all they keep doing is delivering. And you can tell through version 2.4. So if you have not played with the 2.4 beta, it's still 2.3 is a long-term release. 2.4 beta came out about a month ago. Highly, highly recommend you take a look, especially because they added in S3 connectors, Azure Blob Storage connectors, which that's what I've really been playing with, is taking a unified namespace, okay? So taking a model inside of HiByte and mapping it to an S3 file share in Azure. And one of the things that I always talk about is imagine a unified namespace as a file share for your business. Okay, so all I'm doing is just testing my ability to do that. Okay, but I highly recommend that that you guys take a look at it. Take a look at that beta version. All right, which brings me to a big topic that you remember I shot a video a couple months ago that was like what OEMs what they don't get about Industry 4.0. And here's what it is. If you're a company that makes hardware or software for industry, okay, you have defined a set of problems that you want to solve, right? And if you think about the way most industrial products are developed, it's generally somebody who worked for the end user. They have experience in manufacturing. They have experience in industry. They have experience in a specific problem, okay? And that specific problem could have been, hey, in 2000, manufacturing execution systems didn't exist. They may not have called it that. But what is missing is a software layer that helps us take a work order that's created in the ERP and then track the status of that work order through our business at each individual asset, starting that work order, stopping that work order, counting the finished goods, counting the waste, all that kind of stuff. Somebody may have mastered the art of that working for an end user, and they created some type of homebrew thing that worked for their employer. And then what they said was, well, fuck, I'm going to go sell, I'm going to harden this, and I'm going to make it for somebody else, okay? Or make it for everybody. That's where Ignition came from, by the way. That's where Inductive Ignition came from in 2003 as factory PMI. That's where Wonderware came from. I mean, that's where all of these tools came from. They came from that space. I mean, Ignition was developed by an integrator, okay? I mean, so what happens is that those products are generally developed to solve a specific set of problems. And whether that's a piece of hardware, an embedded controller, whether it's a PLC that someone develops, whether it's a sensor that someone develops, or it's a piece of software that goes somewhere in the stack. But one of the questions that most, and when I say most, I mean 99% of OEMs don't ask, is how is this going to fit into the digital infrastructure of the rest of the business? Okay? So when we talk about with manufacturers, we're saying you need to build a digital infrastructure, and that digital infrastructure needs to be all your smart things interoperating with one another through common technology, right? That's where edge-driven, report by exception, lightweight, open architecture comes from. We created the unified namespace as an integrator, we created the unified namespace because I knew that for two things, we could develop solutions faster, solve problems faster on a common infrastructure if we just extended this unified namespace. Every new problem gets a new functional namespace that I extend, but it can interoperate with the existing data that we're using for all the other problems, right? Number one, it was short time to value because we were extending. But number two, it had to do with turnover. It had to do with most integrators had super, super high turnover because their engineers were having to do the same project over and over and over again, right? They never got to the holy grail stuff. They never got to the things that they really wanted to do, which was show me that big, huge data store. Let me sniff around on what you got, and let me save you $50 million by writing you an algorithm that's going to take these billions of rows of data you have and turn it into some golden nugget that's going to transform your business, right? That's what we really want to do, right? People used to ask me when I was younger at the beginning of my career, Walker, what's your dream job? And I said, my dream job is to sit at a circular desk and control a plant without ever having to go out on a plant floor. I used to say that. I want to sit in a circular desk so I could just rotate around in my chair and I would just have nothing but screens all around me and I could do everything I needed to do. Absolutely everything without having to get out of that chair. Now, people used to joke that, oh, well, that's, I love this, the old school adage that, they'll have electricians and mechanics like do their rounds with a clipboard. They go around, take measurements off instruments and stuff. And if you ask the supervisors, they'll say, oh, the reason they do that isn't just to collect that data, which it is, but they know that the electricians are just pencil whipping that shit. They know that the mechanics aren't really, they remember the value from yesterday and they're writing it down. And after 5 years, you can't trust, all they're doing is pencil whipping that. That's all just bullshit that's on the paper. The goal is just to get them out there on the plant floor looking at things, being exposed to things. If you're walking around, then you can see problems. My attitude was, well, fuck, I could be way more efficient. It's a waste of time to do the walking because I could bring the problems to me. Not only that, I could make a problem smart and the problem could tell me it existed. And that used to be my whole mentality. Like in the early days, it had nothing to do with the fact that I didn't want to go walk around. It was that I wanted to be famous in my organizations. I wanted to be the guy who kept my steel mill in upstate New York from moving to, China or from moving to Mexico. I wanted to be the one who developed the technology that kept us there. Well, I started developing this concept that all smart things in an organization need to interoperate with one another through a common technology in service of achieving that goal of being able to sit in that circular desk, so that every machine that got installed needed to plug into what I already had, as opposed to me having to integrate to that thing they installed. So that's where this whole concept came from, 20 years ago. So fast forward to that video I shot about OEMs. 20 years later, OEMs still, 99% of OEMs still do not consider how the smart thing they're making is going to plug into the infrastructure of the customer they're selling their thing to. So someone reached out to me. This organization reached out to us, who they have a software platform that's very impressive. Like I really like what they've done. It's young, but it's very, very cool stuff. I can't talk about any of the details yet, but I want to talk about the conversations I've been having with these guys. And this is a gifted company. The founder of the company, the guy who developed the technology, the company's named after him. This guy gets it. But like me, he's got a board of directors. He's got business people who make the business decisions, right? And we're going to have to spend a lot of time convincing the decision makers in that organization that what they need to do is they need to support the development of a functional namespace for their product. So what their product does is it basically informs operators of problems, okay? And they have custom algorithms that do that stuff. And the way they do it is they consume databases. They consume databases from the customer that the customer already has, like quality production stuff, right? And then they consume it and they convert the data from the databases they have into like this normalized database. Then they put a API on top of it, and then they put a UI layer on top of it, and then they have lots of jobs that run and transactions that run that basically run these algorithms, look for problems, and then notify operators of these problems, and then ask the operators to give feedback on what those problems were. It's a brilliant concept, brilliant product. What I've been saying to them is, I asked them, how long does it take you guys to integrate this? So when you want to, the customer's got databases. They may not have machine connectivity or anything, but they've got databases. They're all in the automotive industry. And they have all been collecting this data forever and ever and ever. And they said, it takes, whatever. Let's say they said it takes 8 weeks, right, to integrate. And that 8 weeks is really basically learning the databases the customer has, and then essentially converting the structure and the events and the rows into their database structure that they already have. And the really secret sauce is what they do there in the middle, right? And I said, well, I could turn your 8-week integration into 1 day. And when I first met them, and they said, what? I said, well, yeah, we can create a functional namespace. So I can create a functional namespace that maps to all the stuff that they put in their databases that actually originates in an event somewhere, either an operator event or a machine event. Well, if I'm working with your customer, the first thing we're going to do is create a unified namespace that aggregates all of the machine events and all the operator events and all the events. Well, we could create a functional namespace for your product, and we can share that functional namespace with any integrator. So any integrator that wants to use your product, we could share that functional namespace in JSON format to them, and they can basically insert it into their unified namespace. That all they have to do is map the events, the appropriate events that you need, and then they would just transmit your functional namespace to an endpoint right at your database. And as those events are changing, that rows are inserting into your database, and then you can consume them and notify, and you take out this whole step here. And they said, well, what about customers who don't use a unified namespace? I said, well, they will. I mean, they will, or they're not going to be around. I mean, it's just, they're going to have to use something like it. Now, whether they format it in ISA 95 Part 2, whether they use PubSub, unless we develop some type of technology that can scale to tens of millions of data points without using PubSub, using server client, which you can't do it at that scale. That's why you need PubSub, okay? unless somebody develops some technology that's going to scale to tens of millions of data points without doing a shit ton of load balancing and multi-tenant or multi-client connections, that kind of stuff, then PubSub is what you've got to use. And I can't imagine a naming standard other than ISA 95 Part 2 that anyone's going to use. So I think we've predicted what's going to happen. We just did it early. I said about what you could do is keep integrating the way you do. So for the customers who don't have any technology, who aren't, they're not building a unified namespace, you keep integrating the way you are. You know what I mean? 8 weeks, whatever. But for the customers that do, what we can do is we can offer your product as an add-on because you have specific capabilities that customers need that people aren't selling right now. Right? I mean, they're not right now. Everybody's doing MES in that first year or whatever. We could basically add this on to solve a specific problem for them, and you'd be doing it on this common infrastructure. And the CTO, the founder of the company, the guy who's developed the technology, developed the product, their business development guy, I don't know if he's chief marketing officer or whatever. They're all on board, but not everyone's on board yet, right? And here's why. There's this fear. In order for you to build a functional namespace, okay, so for the OEMs out there that are like, okay, what do we got to do? So if you look at the way all products are basically built one of two ways. They all have a backend that has a master data model. So think of a series of tables, right? A series of tables in a database that are all related to one another. So, but there's one table that you could trace everything back to. In every database, it's that way, by the way. There's always one table you could always get back to in the schema. And that table is generally the highest level table. In ISA 95, that would be a table called enterprise, right? And then you would have a list of enterprises in your enterprise table. There would be an enterprise ID, and you would have, say, a site table, and you would have a list of sites, and each site would be connected through a foreign key to an enterprise ID, the enterprise table. So the enterprise would be that first table in basically any MES system and any ERP system. That's how it is. If you look at any MES system, the enterprise is the root table. What we do with unified namespaces is we basically take the table hierarchy, the ERD, the entity relational diagram in a database, and we turn that into a tree structure. So if you're going to create a functional namespace for a product that has a backend that's a database, all we do is turn that ERD into a functional namespace. Well, here's the obvious question. When someone says, well, Walker, what about the scenarios where you may have multiple tables that foreign key back to the same table? Well, the answer so what would end up happening is that table would be the table that uses multiple foreign keys back to multiple tables. That table is going to show up in multiple places. Okay, that entity is going to show up in multiple places. Okay, so let's say I had a table called OEE, and that OEE could either be tied to an area, the area table, or it could be tied to a site table, or it could be tied to a line. What you end up with is enterprise site with an OEE underneath it, and then area with an OEE under it, and then line with an OEE under it. OEE is in multiple places. All we do is we create a functional namespace and a tree structure from an ERD. Well, here's the problem that we run into is when you build a product, you basically build it one of two ways. You have backend with an API and a UI. So the UI uses the application programming interface to retrieve the data from the backend that you visualize. So like in all of your applications, like on your phone, they're all built that way. Okay. So they're built, you have the UI, which you're interacting with, and then there's a common API underneath that, which is depending upon if you use Swift or whatever to make your mobile application. And then there's data underneath it, and it's in a backend. It could be stored in, a SQLite database or whatever, MySQL in the cloud, however you want to do it. So you build it one of two ways. You either go backend, API to retrieve the data, UI to see the data, or you do backend with just UI. And so like a lot of Windows applications are built this way, where you'll have a backend, like a SQL Server backend, and then you'll use something like WPF or Visual Basic or, WPF or .NET, which is it's a framing tool. It basically creates visualizations where it literally goes and gets the data from the backend directly from the backend. The visualization queries the backend as opposed to going through an API. Well, the thing we care about, what you want to expose if you're going to take a product I've developed and I want to be able to integrate that into a unified namespace. I want to be able to get the data into your backend without having to do a bunch of custom integration. What I do is I create a functional namespace in the unified namespace that basically streams to your backend. But in order for me to do that, you have to tell me what your backend looks like. You have to give me an ERD, because I can't create a functional namespace if I don't know how you built it. Now, most people who build applications know the backend is not the important part. It's the API, right? It's the API. It's the algorithms that run in the API. It's the tools that you've built in hard code that's really your intellectual property. The backend, most people you could reverse engineer the backend of any application. Most good engineers could do that. But many OEMs are very, very hesitant, especially in legacy companies, to say, here's what our ERD looks like. Build a functional namespace that looks like this. And so, my follow-up to that original, video, what OEMs don't get is, you have to be thinking about how can we take the data that we have and integrate it into a digital infrastructure for another organization. And one of the things I said to this guy was, there are KPIs you calculate using your algorithms that would be valuable for other tools to use. So the results of those calculations need to somehow get back to a common infrastructure so that data scientists, operations analysts can take that data and combine it with other data from other tools to create additional value, solve new problems for, their manufacturer. And this is a thing that is still a huge problem for OEMs, especially legacy OEMs. Okay. And I'm part of the reason that I'm motivated to do the Shaw Classic thing, and is what I'm trying to do is demonstrate to the industry, to all industry, what is actually possible. That the real value in a product is not the data store. It's not the back end you created. I mean, you're not special. You built a schema. Come on. That isn't hard. But all that code you put into your API, I mean, the algorithms, the specific algorithms you've written to take data that's in your backend and convert it into value that people can see, that they can act on, that's your intellectual property. So stop worrying about exposing your backend, okay, if you're an OEM, all right? Anyway, I know that was long-winded, but I wanted to drive home this one point here. There's a common presentation I give all the time at the beginning of our classes. When I do keynote addresses, I'll get a lot of, whenever I do a presentation, people will want me to do a presentation in like 30 minutes. They'll go, oh, hey, we want you to do a keynote. We want you to speak for 30 minutes and then answer questions. If the audience I'm talking to knows nothing about digital transformation, really knows digital transformation, knows nothing about Industry 4.0, doesn't know edge-driven, report by exception, lightweight, open architecture, doesn't know why is it a technology-driven approach is superior to a solution-driven approach, that is, go to Rockwell and buy it off the shelf, is inferior to picking common technology and then picking the off-the-shelf solutions based on that common technology, so all my off-the-shelf solutions can talk to one another through edge-driven, report by exception, lightweight, open architecture, so you don't make the mistake of picking, OPC-UA as a centerpiece of your digital infrastructure. If you don't know those things, then you first need to be taught those things. And so I have this common presentation I do, which if you guys are in mentorship or mastermind, you've heard this fucking thing a million times, but it's the important general concepts of when digitally transforming, which is just one part of that presentation. And it's this. Number one, you must know what your digital strategy is always, in 3 sentences. What is our digital strategy? Right? AWS's digital strategy, I can't recite it from memory, but Amazon Web Services digital strategy was we will share all data and information between departments and between internal and external customers using services and common technology. That was their digital strategy. And the idea was that they could use one common strategy, one common technology, and just continue to extend, like just sort of extend out more and more features. That turned into Amazon Web Services, right? Number one, you must know what your digital strategy is. And the vast majority of manufacturers, OEMs, systems integrators, they don't even have one at all, let alone they know it. They don't even have one. And it's amazing to me how many organizations get offended when I ask them, what's your digital strategy? Yeah, I was just talking to this major OEM the last couple of weeks, the senior executive. I had lunch with the senior executive and stuff for this huge OEM. And I mean, I know he was obviously offended. He obviously got pissed off at me when I told him that I had written his company off. They were on our whiteboard of dead companies. And I know for him, he can't even wrap his brain around the idea that his company would somehow not make it through the 4th Industrial Revolution as a major player. But that's the same thing that Kodak thought, right? I mean, the people who worked at Kodak never thought that Kodak would die, right? The people who worked at Smith Corona, okay? Smith Corona was the largest typewriter manufacturer in the world. They were a major, major player. And they never thought they would die. And the mistake they made was they didn't switch to word processor because they never believed anyone would use them. And then they never switched to computers because they didn't believe people would use them. Okay? There are a lot of people here who are saying we're not going to switch to digital infrastructure because there's no value there. And I'll say to them, well, how the fuck do you think Tesla does what they do? I mean, honestly, how do you think they do what they do? I was talking to this one guy today. He really tried to argue that Tesla has not overtaken Ford and General Motors as the car company in the United States. You're out of your fucking mind if you don't think Tesla has taken over. In 6 months, the supercharger, 15 minutes from my house, went from, I think it has 16 stalls or something. It went from you could drive over there at any time, okay, and just back in and supercharge it, to now it's a 1 hour wait to use that supercharger. That's how many cars Tesla has sold just in my area in 6 months. They're the number one car manufacturer in what is it, Denmark, or I just read it. I don't remember. It's a European country. They sell more cars in that country than any other car manufacturer. And if 2 years ago, all the articles were Elon Musk drove the company into the ground, they're dead. You haven't seen if Ford and General Motors had done what Tesla had done over the last 3 years, we'd be talking about how they transformed the world. Okay. But I was having this conversation with this OEM. I want to go back to this senior executive who got a little upset with me. And I told him I wrote you guys off for dead. I didn't think you were going to get it, And he said, why? And I said, lack of leadership. I don't see the transformative leadership in your organization. I just don't see it. Now, I know most people, they're sitting in front of this guy who makes, I'm sure his bonuses are in the 7 figures. I mean, he's very, very high up in the company. And he was obviously offended I said that, but, it was true. So I asked him. Yeah, he did the whole thing, crossed his arms, he put his leg across his leg, he had his arms crossed, he leaned back, all the body language stuff, right? And Great guy, smart, super smart guy. And in the end, it was a great conversation. But in that moment in the conversation, it was really, really uncomfortable. And so I just asked him, what's your digital strategy? I'll prove my point right now. And that's what I said. I said, what's your digital strategy? And he told me he couldn't tell me. Then he said, well, if we get an NDA, I can show you the document. I said, oh, good. We already have an NDA. And they never told me what the digital strategy was. Now, I'm not picking on this company. I don't want to put them on blast because I think, I want to illustrate a point. And my point is, if anyone has a digital strategy, it should be this company. And if they don't have a digital strategy that he could recite off the top of his head and the other 4 people from his company at the table couldn't recite off the top of his head, then they're not on their journey yet. And if they're not on their journey yet, where do you think a lot of other organizations are? Okay. Number 2, you must approach every project as one part of a bigger whole. This is a thing OEMs don't get. They don't understand. They're still selling software that solves a very specific problem, and they never ask the question, how is the data and information that our solution creates going to be used to solve other problems in other platforms? They don't ask that question, and they need to. Number 3, make no assumptions about how data will be consumed. You guys have all heard this. All data matters. The 4th industrial revolution is about becoming a data company. It's about making the most valuable commodity you create, data. And this is why I'm giving Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, such a hard time, because Jim Farley has still not said, how is it Ford is becoming a data company? How is Ford becoming a data company? And let me say this when I talk about, I say General Motors is dead. Okay, I say that. Mary Barra is not going to lead General Motors to the promised land. You can take that to the bank. Okay. Walker, how do you know that? Okay, here's how I know it. One of the, emerging electric companies that General Motors is affiliated with asked us to review, they wanted our help. In the end, we decided not to work with them, decided not to help them. By the way, nobody would have made that decision other than us. But it was obvious that the way that they had built their manufacturing facility was to mirror exactly what General Motors already does, which is nothing but, additive manufacturing in data silos. Transactional, not real time. There was nothing bleeding edge about, and that facility was built from the ground up, brand new. Okay. And if that's the type of advice General Motors is giving this supposedly emerging company, they're in a lot of trouble. Okay. Number 4, treat all producers and consumers of data as a node in an ecosystem. Again, OEMs, the stuff you're making is a node, and you have to be able to share your data and information, not just through your UI, but through other mechanisms. Okay. Build a tech stack. Obviously, don't build a software solution stack is number 5. And number 6, you must remain agile. Most important thing, and I think most people forget this, what a customer wants is a function of what they know. Okay? What they're asking you, the problem they're trying to solve is a function of what they know, the problems they're aware of. Okay? Truly elite organizations are using their data, they're using software tools, specifically machine learning and artificial intelligence, to find patterns in data human beings can't see. Corollaries between data points that we never thought of. Right? It's really easy to correlate flow control valve with flow. Okay? It's really easy to correlate flow control valve with pressure. Okay? It is much more difficult to correlate flow control valve with pump curve over time, or flow control valve with plumbing failure once every 18 months. Okay? But software, machine learning algorithms, they can find those patterns, those correlations. Okay? And the elite companies in the world are using, they're putting all their data in the same place in a common structure, and then they're laying super smart tools on top of that to find patterns that human beings can't see. And then the human beings are setting up they're building solutions to test the hypotheses that these smart tools have come up with for them. Okay. All right. A couple of questions and then we'll call it a day. There was an Industry 5.0 video that Zach did in January. So it was called The Most Important Shift in Industry ... 5.0. You guys remember, I didn't do that video. Zach did the video. I didn't watch it when he produced it. I did watch the first 3 minutes, and it was like super, super high production quality, but I never actually watched the video. But we got a comment on it the other day, or just yesterday, and I want to talk about what this guy said and clarify some points in that video and make some important points here. So number one, he says Tesla doesn't create energy. It stores it with its batteries. Tesla does not produce a product with a low carbon footprint. Factor in all the mining that took place to get the supplies for the batteries and watch their carbon footprint soar. It was too hard to take the rest of your video seriously, and now this channel. Okay, so this guy's name was Scott Palmer, and he took a couple of shots at us, which I'm good with, right? If I respect this guy's opinion. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to clarify a couple of things that were in that video. Okay, so because I did go back and watch the whole video, and what I would say is this: Zach misspoke when he said Tesla creates energy. Anybody who takes physics knows energy is not created; it's only transferred. Right? He misspoke. Anybody who watches the video knows that he didn't mean to say create. Okay, but this guy was taking a shot at him. But my answer was, on Tesla creating energy, Tesla's transferring energy. Okay, nothing creates energy; it's only transferred. They're transferring it from mechanical to electrical through their regenerative braking on their cars, and then they're doing it from photon to electrical through their solar. And if you want to see some of the most impressive technology Tesla's developed, it's definitely like in the Powerwall and in their solar technology for homes. Number two, on the carbon footprint, and this is the more important piece, and I think something our audience needs to understand and really run with, okay? So one need only take a single organic chemistry course to realize that the transfer of energy from one organic compound to another, or unlocking energy from an organic compound, either at the macro or micro level, so multi-process or single process, generally results in carbon, okay, the C in organic, being a byproduct of that transfer. So all organic compounds, generally they have carbon. That's what makes them organic, right? Generally, that carbon's not used in the transfer of energy. It's generally a byproduct of the transfer. That's how you end up with carbon and oxygen combining together for CO2 that ends up in the atmosphere, okay? Now there are ways to mitigate that, right? Like with CH4, which is methane, right? If you take CH4 and you could more cleanly burn it when you're burning that hydrogen, right? But you can also burn it in a way where water vapor is the byproduct, okay? But when I finished the comment, I said this: Zach should have more clearly stated that what Tesla is doing is merely a single step in a journey of 1,000 miles. And he knows that, by the way. We've talked about it a million times. But just because he didn't articulate that doesn't mean that that's not true. Like, this Scott Palmer guy really took a shot at this video, which I actually think is unfair. I respect his opinion, but it's unfair. Zach should have more clearly stated that what Tesla is doing is merely a single step in a journey of 1,000 miles over time. Okay, and this is a really important point here. The carbon footprint shrinks. So the mining impact, that is all the diesel fuel used to, all the diesel fuel used to do the mining, the ammonium nitrate used to blow up the ground, all that kind of stuff, all that carbon footprint stuff. That carbon footprint shrinks. So the mining impact is spread across many consumptions as lithium is recycled over and over. Okay. Right now, most people know that lithium batteries are very hard to recycle. And the reason why is not that they're not recyclable. It's that it's not cost effective to recycle because of the amount of work that goes into disassembling the batteries. Okay. So here's the point. And this is the thing where people just don't understand what, what Elon Musk and Tesla is doing in terms of making us more sustainable. The first step in achieving cheap and easy recycling of lithium is creating the supply of recyclable lithium and then the demand for it to be recycled. So all the batteries that are being created right now are creating the supply. Okay? And all the people who want those batteries recycled at a much lower cost is creating the demand. So that generates an incentive for the market to invest in the development of the recycling technology. So see our definitions of Industry 4.0 and digital transformation. In Kaizen terms, Kaikaku, it's old game, new rules through groundbreaking technology. Of course, it takes a lot of carbon, it increases the carbon footprint to pull the lithium out of the ground. But what we're doing is creating an incentive by creating lithium-ion batteries and using them in electrical cars and in solar technologies and power walls. We are creating the market incentive for someone to develop low-cost recycling technology. That is, someone to invest dollars in being able to disassemble and recycle lithium batteries at low cost. And it will happen. Why? Because lithium is recyclable. Okay? All it is someone has to invest invest the capital into making the process of recycling much more cost effective. Okay? This is a really super important point. By the way, I love that video that Zach did. So it really pissed me off. People don't take shots at me in videos very often. We don't get a lot of negative comments. I don't mind the negative comments as long as they're fair. This one wasn't fair. This was, Bush League. Doesn't create energy. He's correct. They don't. They store it with batteries. Energy is only transferred. We'll give him that one. But when he talked about low carbon footprint, okay, factor in all the mining that took place to get the supplies for the batteries and watch their carbon footprint soar. Yeah, but let's compare the carbon footprint for the lithium that was pulled out of the ground and recycled over 100 years. And then the per capita carbon footprint will be microscopic. Okay. And then the last question that I want to answer today is this Fahad Arif. A few days ago, he asked a question in the 6-layer model of automation video. It's for the advanced. He said, you mentioned that the instrument would have a direct fast connection with the PLC DCS like field bus, and other upper layers could also take data from the instrument. How would the instrument communicate directly with the upper layers? Will the information not be retrieved from the PLC DCS? Great question. The answer is, in legacy technology, you're always going to gateway between that field instrument and your upper layers in the stack. So that is your cloud technology. You may acquire that through the PLC or the DCS, or you may acquire it through another field level gateway that's at collecting that sensor data. That's for legacy implementations. There's another video I talked about where, eventually all sensors are going to be smart on their own. They're going to support. Right now, you can add in IIoT support on a proc switch or something for peanuts. I mean, really for basically nothing. Okay, and so I could take that proc switch or that thermocouple, and I can literally connect that device as smart to an MQTT broker. I could do that at very, very little cost for pennies for pennies on each thermocouple, pennies on each proc switch. I could make that smart and have it connect directly into the infrastructure. So for now, it's going to be through gateways, sometimes through PLC DCS. That's a common way of aggregating it, but I think more field bus level. So think edge PC, edge gateway. And then in the future, it's all smart devices that everyone's going to be buying. So anyway, that's going to be it for this week. Hopefully this was valuable. I wanted to touch on some things that I don't generally talk about, and I generally keep the podcast meant, to answer direct questions from the community, but also to talk to a very broad audience. So I'm not talking to a technical audience in the podcast. We do that in mentorship and mastermind. So as you get as you get deeper, as the audience gets smaller and smaller and smaller, they get more and more technical. And so if you look at the various audiences we have, these big audiences that we have, it's the thousands, like on LinkedIn or in YouTube, that's a really broad audience. And the way I communicate is designed to speak to everybody, okay, not lose anyone. The more technical stuff is the closer you get to mastermind, the audience gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and the discussion gets more and more technical. Today, I had more of a technical discussion, especially centered around OEMs and functional namespaces and how software is built. We generally don't talk about that kind of stuff in this podcast. I decided to give it a try in this pre-recorded version, okay, to see how that resonates. So if you enjoyed this content, if you like the podcast, please like, subscribe, more importantly, comment below. If you guys are watching on Apple Podcasts or whatever, or listening on Apple Podcasts, please take time, jump over to the YouTube channel, give it a like, give it a comment. Let me know if this format, the type of content that we went over today was valuable. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.